Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. This is a special Monday morning mega malicious compliance compilation. 2 hours of people doing exactly what they're told regardless of the consequences. Make sure to follow on your preferred podcasting platform or subscribe on YouTube, and definitely drop a like on this video because it really helps us out. On to the stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Dak6969696969. I'll make your damn pizza boxes. For some background, I used to work at a family-owned pizzeria in my hometown. At the time this story took place, I had been delivering food for them as well as picking up the odd pizza oven shift for close to 8 years. Aside from the owner and 2 of our 3 managers, I was their longest tenured employee. Towards the end of my stint working there, I began to feel incredibly disrespected and undervalued by the owner as well as 2 of our managers. 2 of my regular 4 shifts per week were unfortunately shared with a manager who had started at the job before me, as well as the manager who had started after me. Both of these managers had personal relationships with my boss, and neither of them actually managed anything. Scheduling our shifts was always up to the delivery drivers and waitresses and phone people amongst themselves. We didn't actually have anybody at this pizzeria that functioned as a real manager. Anyway, the manager that had started after me, we'll call her Karen for the sake of this story, had been rudely telling me to fold pizza boxes up for about 4 days in a row. For those of you who aren't aware, when pizza boxes are delivered from wholesalers to pizzerias, they come in stacks of 100, and they don't come folded. There are perforations along the box that make it easy to fold up, but they need to be made into boxes manually. At my pizzeria, it was the delivery people's job to fold the pizza boxes. Anyway, Karen had been rudely ordering me to fold up the pizza boxes for a few days in a row, not once actually asking or saying please. By the 4th day of this, I was fed up with being disrespected by someone who had been working there less time than I had, under an imaginary title that didn't even reflect her job duties. Our seating layout consisted of 2 booths that would seat 2 people, so 4 in total per table. We had 1 table in the back that only had 1 booth that nobody used, and 1 large double table with a cornered booth that could fit a party of 10. The delivery guys would sit in the big booth in the back and use the double table to fold up the pizza boxes unless there was a party larger than 4 people that needed the booth. So when Karen rudely ordered me to fold up boxes for the 4th day in a row, I hatched a plan. I told my delivery partner, I'm gonna make so many boxes that they'll never ask me to make boxes again. And I did just that. I folded up enough 12-inch pizza boxes to fill the entire cornered booth in the back. That wasn't enough though, because when I took the boxes from the booth to the shelf where we stored them in the back room, I had space to make more boxes. So I filled the entire booth again. That wasn't enough either though, because I stored the boxes that were in the booth on the 1 table that no customers used. Naturally, since there was more room on the large booth, I filled it up with boxes for a 3rd time, making sure there was no room for any customers to sit. Of course, since my oblivious and unobservant manager didn't notice that I was doing this, apparently she noticed anytime I wasn't folding up boxes, I began storing the boxes on top of the table. I managed to cover one of the 2 tables in the back with 9 stacks of boxes before Karen noticed what I was doing and told me to stop. In my defense, I stopped folding boxes as soon as Karen told me to. Granted, by the time she had noticed what I was doing, there was nowhere for large parties to sit and nowhere else for me to put the pizza boxes. I lamented the fact that Karen would rather see me come into work and do what was expected of me instead of going above and beyond, and she told me to stop being a smart butt. This constant disrespect and underappreciation is what eventually led me to take my talents to another local pizzeria, whose owners actually appreciated the work I did. OP, was there a reason why you folded so easily to the boss's orders? I mean, did you feel boxed in by needing to have that job? I understand your compliance, though folding boxes is a pizza cake, and I hope your boss was really crusty afterwards. This story comes to us from MD Lapla, Malicious Compliance to Catch a Thief, or 3. My uncle, now retired, told me this story. It happened probably around 2005 to 2010, something like that. He used to work for a security company, the kind that handles factory security, night guards, access and perimeter alarms, that kind of job. He was the senior management of the team, handling the night shift for important clients, as well as surveilling the original installation of the security equipment for those clients. He gets a call to do an installation on a factory that has been having a lot of theft. He goes there and interviews the 3 owners separately. Each one has a 30-something% stake in the company. The company is old, and whatever chemistry those 3 originally had is long gone. Each one voices his suspicions that the thefts are inside jobs, and each one even implies that they suspect the other 2 of being behind the theft. Also, all 3 adamantly say they want to know where the cameras are and they want the thieves caught ASAP as cheaply as possible. Uncle vows to comply but says that if they want to be cheap about it, there might be some blind spots that they can't cover. All 3 owners are okay with that. Uncle always told me that the one thing he learned on that job is that Dr. House was right. Everybody lies. So he decides to do the job with a little bit of maliciousness. All 3 owners said they wanted to know where the cameras were. All 3 said they wanted to be as cheap as possible. So Uncle and his team install 3 hidden cameras that, as a whole, cover the whole factory floor, but they budget for 2. The service is apparently a bit overpriced, so they still make money out of it, and there's a bonus for catching the thieves. However, Uncle tells each owner the location of 2 of the 3 cameras separately. To owner 1, he tells the location of cameras 1 and 2, but not 3. To owner 2, location of cameras 1 and 3. To owner 3, location of cameras 2 and 3. They all ask for blind spots. Uncle tells them where they are regarding the cameras each one of them has been told. But those blind spots are covered by the camera each owner knows nothing about. Oh, each owner said they wanted to catch the thieves ASAP as well. Well, that Uncle did. He caught each one of the owners using their expected blind spots to sneak into the factory undetected and gather some inventory for themselves during the first week. As far as I know, the factory changed ownership and Uncle continued providing security for the new owners. What happened to the old ones? I don't know, but I suspect nothing good. It sounds like OP's uncle had a clear focus on who was causing the problem, and they knew the perfect angle to take care of that situation. Only telling them each about 2 cameras was a great way to frame them. Those 3 bosses learned that sometimes the biggest blind spots are the ones in their morality. This story comes to us from Oh Wretched One. Put my cat to work. I got fired from a sales job by a supervisor who was systematically eliminating everyone and hiring in her sorority sisters. I had dark black uniform skirts, pants, and blouses that I'd been forced to purchase. When I was fired, they demanded the uniforms back. I offered to keep the skirts and blouses that cost up to what I'd paid to date, a couple $100 worth, but they said no, demanded all items back, and refused to give me a refund. They did say I could gather it all and bring it to them a couple of days later. After thoroughly reading my contract, I confirmed I was only required to bring them back undamaged. It didn't say they had to be clean. So when I got home, I poured everything in a big pile and called my cat over. She was a long-haired cat who coated everything I owned in white fluff. When she understood that I was giving her free rein to sleep on the clothes, she obliged. 2 days later, I dropped off a garbage bag filled with now white, fur-covered stinky clothes. The supervisor got annoyed, but I just told her she might want to check the contract. These clothes were quite undamaged, just not clean, and that wasn't stipulated in the contract. I smiled sweetly at her and left the office. Kitty did her job quite well, and she got tuna for dinner that night. I eventually won a small claims court case getting my uniform money back, an all-around win. So, OP, are you saying that they were feline annoyed because of your catastrophic response to their policy? I do love how Kitty clearly understood their purpose. and positively helped you with your revenge. This story comes to us from Icy Computer Poop. You want your uniform back? Come and get it. I used to work in a hotel as a porter. We had to wear white shirts and black pants, and they provided us with a uniform, which was just a nondescript black vest. I worked there part-time, but also had another part-time job at the post office. I told them about the second job before they hired me. They asked me what I'd do about conflicting shifts, and I said I would work for whichever company booked my time first. So if the post office said they wanted me next week on Wednesday to Saturday, and then later the hotel asked me to work that time, I'd have to say I was unavailable. I would also naturally do the same thing if the situations were reversed. I honored that agreement the entire time I worked for them, and it wasn't a problem for over a year. Then, one day, I get told by the hotel that I have to work an upcoming weekend. I said I couldn't accept the shift because I had already booked one at my second place of work. My hotel boss said, "Well, this is a huge contract. We have a massive wedding taking place on the same weekend as a large conference, and we need all hands on deck." I reminded them, once again, that I couldn't accept a shift if it conflicted with one I had previously booked. Boss got real annoyed and pushy and tried the "we have to be able to rely on you" BS spiel. I reminded him that they could rely on me doing exactly what I promised in my interview, and that they had been able to rely on me for over a year. I also pointed out that it's not reasonable to demand that I work a shift that I hadn't agreed to work. Boss was still pissy when he hung up. They don't fire me, but over the next month, I couldn't help but notice I never got any shift offers. It became obvious I was being fired, but without actually being told I was fired. I called several times and asked if there were any shifts, but was always told, "We have nothing for you at this time," in a cold tone. I checked with my friends who worked at the hotel, and they all said that business was normal, and they could see no reason why I wasn't being offered shifts. No worries, I just picked up more shifts at the post office, and they paid almost twice as much, so cool by me. Another couple of weeks goes by, and my direct supervisor at the hotel called me to ask for my uniform vest back. I asked why, saying that I hadn't been fired so far as I know, I still worked there. My boss just kept sidestepping my question and refused to answer, and refused to admit that I had been fired. He just kept saying, "We need that uniform, you have to give it back." I said, "No problem." He starts saying, "You can drop it off anytime." And I interrupted him to say, "No, I won't be dropping it off." He stopped for a moment, flustered, then said, "But you have to. It's a part of your employment contract." "Yes, I know," I replied. "I read the contract. It merely states that I have to return the uniform when requested. It doesn't say I have to deliver it to you, so I won't. You can send someone to pick it up at a time that is convenient to me." The hotel was in a different city from my hometown, so it was about a half-hour to 45-minute drive to my place. My ex-boss tried to bully me, but funny how losing his ability to deny me work had shifted our power balance. He sputtered and stammered as he tried to figure out some way to goad or coerce me into driving the vest to him, but finally gave up. He said he'd send someone sometime, so be ready for whenever that is. And I told him no, that he'd have to contact me to prearrange a time that was convenient. I said I'd check my calendar, and he could call me back in a couple of days to make arrangements. Petty, I know, but hearing the exasperation and annoyance in his tone as we spoke was very, very enjoyable. He never did send anyone to pick up the vest, so I ended up using it as part of a Halloween costume. So, OP, are you saying that you weren't invested enough in this job that you would follow up with the constructive dismissal? Because most places, that's not completely legal. You could really disrupt the fabric of this company because them giving you less shifts was a threadbare excuse to try and make you quit. I don't know if you are suited for revenge, but that's probably the route that I would take. This story comes to us from Nina XC. Not allowed in the kitchen? Okay. For context, my mom, 54 female, goes and does a lot of work at the senior center. Will not give names or locations due to privacy concerns. Also, she's not labeled as a volunteer, but she's on the staff board. I still don't understand that either. Also, my mom used to work for a catering company, so she knows her way around a kitchen. Much needed information for later on. Last bit of context, she also makes the coffee, so this is just one example of it, and there's others that I don't want to list. Now for the malicious compliance. Recently, my mom goes into the kitchen and gets her mug for coffee, but one of the volunteers comes up to her and said that she wasn't allowed to go into the kitchen because she wasn't a volunteer. Well, since my mom wasn't allowed in the kitchen, she would do one of two things. One, she would tell someone to get a coffee pot from the kitchen, they get the coffee pot, and she's like, I can't make coffee without the coffee filter, instead of telling someone all at once. Two, she would tell person one to get one thing, and person two to get another thing involving that same task to make the other person feel useful. Now, there's a bit of controversy involved, and I'm wondering if this is considered malicious compliance and slightly petty, or not. So, OP, what you're saying is that your mom brewed up some creative malicious compliance? And now you're wondering if it actually is malicious compliance, or if it needs to be filtered out? I feel like she was pretty grounded in her response, and she gave them a double shot of malicious compliance. This story comes to us from WideTrip8392. No assistant for me? Let's see how that works out. This happened almost 15 years ago when I was still living in my home country. I worked in a warehouse that served as a distribution center for a supermarket chain, a very famous one by the way. I was an inspector in the shipping department. Basically, the sorting section would bring to the docks the goods that the store had requested, and we would prepare and load the shipment onto the truck. In the shipping department, there were assistants who did the manual work, assembling the loads on pallets, wrapping them with stretch film, and loading them onto the truck, while the inspector checked whether everything being sent to the store was correctly labeled and secure for transport. Additionally, the inspector entered all data in the internal system, sealed the truck, and printed the load summary for the administrative department to generate an invoice. Of course, inspectors also helped the assistants with the heavy lifting. Most of the time, this didn't interfere with our main responsibilities and actually sped up the process, especially since our shift, the afternoon shift, had an issue with trucks arriving late. Many times, we wouldn't finish everything on time, leading to overtime and sometimes having to leave the remaining work for the night shift, which wasn't ideal, since each shift had its own list of stores to attend to, and this delay would affect them. Each inspector worked with at least one assistant, but sometimes more, depending on their workload. Some inspectors had more stores to handle that day, some stores required extra loads, or other situations that called for additional help. We had a supervisor who had been with the company for many years, and had worked in the department before being promoted. The job was great, and everything ran smoothly, until a crisis hit another department, leaving it without a supervisor. Management decided they needed someone experienced to lead that department, so they transferred our supervisor there. In his place, they promoted someone from another department who had no leadership experience. Our department was running well with no need for drastic changes, but our new supervisor didn't see it that way. One day, I arrived at work, and as usual at the beginning of the shift, the supervisor printed out a sheet listing the stores to be handled that day, along with which inspector was assigned to each one. So far, so good. He made some changes, but nothing too concerning. However, before we started working, he called the entire department for a quick meeting. In this meeting, he announced that he had reassigned which assistants would work with which inspectors, and showed us a printed list. To my surprise, there was no name next to mine. In other words, I was expected to work without an assistant. I protested immediately. I don't remember the exact details of the discussion, as it happened a long time ago, but basically, his idea was that as other assistants finished helping their assigned inspectors, whoever was available would come help me. Something that already happened naturally, as we had a strong case of camaraderie in our department. Plus, no one wanted to be seen by the bosses standing around and doing nothing. But it wasn't enough, it would overburden me. I tried to argue my case, but I couldn't convince him. Other inspectors were also left without assistants, but they were relatively new to the company and didn't say anything. Probably out of fear of losing their jobs or something similar. Well, since I couldn't change his mind, I accepted that I would be working without an assistant. I took the signs for the stores I was responsible for, found available docks for them, placed the signs at the dock gates, noted on the printed sheet which stores were at which docks, then went to the dock of the first store I would handle. I leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and waited. Goods started arriving, but I didn't touch a single box. The dock filled up, and I didn't move an inch. After a few hours, the supervisor walked through the department to check on things, saw the state of my dock, and asked why the load wasn't being prepared. I simply said, "I don't have any assistants, how am I supposed to prepare the load?" and remained standing with my arms crossed. Eventually, some assistants came to help me, and when they did, I helped them with the heavy lifting. But soon, the inspectors they were originally assigned to needed more help, and of course, they left my load behind. By the end of the shift, one load was ready to be loaded onto the truck, but another was only halfway done. I placed the paperwork with the load details in a visible spot for whoever would finish it and left. As I was leaving, my supervisor asked about the loads. Without turning around, I told him where the papers were. He asked if I wasn't going to finish them, and I didn't even respond. The next day, he called me in for a meeting. When I arrived, the manager was also there. They asked me what had happened the previous day. I replied, "Nothing that I remember." They brought up the incomplete loads. I explained that my shift had ended and I couldn't stay for overtime, so I left the information for whoever would finish the job, and I even told the supervisor where the papers were. Then, I took out my wallet, pulled out my time card receipt, and showed them that I had clocked out at the designated time. They mentioned that I had spent most of the shift standing with my arms crossed. I responded that I had done my job, which, as stated in my contract, consisted solely of verifying the load, supervising assembly and loading, entering data into the system, sealing the truck, and printing the load summary. Nothing beyond that. I continued by saying that anything else I might do during my shift was purely out of goodwill to help the assistants and speed up the work. But on the previous day, I had chosen to exercise my right to not perform those extra tasks because I felt unfairly treated by my supervisor, who had not assigned me a dedicated assistant. That would have significantly overburdened me with tasks I wasn't paid to do. The manager simply looked at the supervisor and said, "He needs to have an assistant." Then he turned to me and asked me to leave. The two of them stayed there for quite a while. That same day, I was assigned an assistant, and we never spoke of it again. Nothing like that ever happened again. The new supervisor's stint lasted only a few months before he returned to his previous role. He had put too much trust in employees he was friends with, but who weren't very competent at their jobs, and that was his downfall. Our old supervisor came back to his position, and everything improved again. I've got a question for all of you out there. Would you say after all these malicious compliance stories we've done here, that we've all developed a palate for these stories? This new supervisor was just a total load of nonsense. They got shipped back to their old job because they couldn't handle the logistics. OP, well done. You showed them that the workloads need to be evenly stacked or things will start toppling over. This story comes to us from Boppity Boopy. Need my ID after surgery? Bet. Hello, I have no idea how to start this off, so I'll just give the context and jump in. I, 24 female, have been seeing the dentist more often because I now have insurance. The last time I went to a dentist was when I was about 14 or 15. My dentist said a lot of my teeth are salvageable, but I did need to get a lot of teeth pulled, 7 to be exact. It took a couple months to get my teeth pulled and everything, and when it did, oh my lord. The front desk lady told me I'm going to be on antibiotics and pain medication. I'm still kinda recovering. My gums are still pretty sensitive, but overall fine. My brother, 27 male, was my ride, so I called him fresh out of surgery, and he's like, "You were done with surgery?" I responded, "Yeah, but my mouth was stuffed with gauze." I have no idea what you said, but I'm assuming you said yes. He came and got me, and the nurse and my brother had to help me into his truck. We went to the pharmacy, but they were on lunch break. After waiting 30 minutes, their lunch was over. My brother left me in the truck and went into the convenience store. He was in there for a while, like 15 minutes. To most, that doesn't seem long, but to me, since the anesthesia was beginning to wear off, I was squirming in discomfort. While my brother was in the store, the pharmacist was giving him a really hard time, telling him that they needed my ID and all that fun stuff. Cue the malicious compliance. My brother walked out, told me everything, and I began to cry. Just picture an adult woman with baby face, swollen, delirious, in pain, and fresh out of surgery, looking like she was trying to do the Chubby Bunny challenge. Anyway, my brother took me out of his truck and he had to guide me. So all the customers in the store saw a scrawny twig dragging a barely conscious noodle to the pharmacy. He sat me down in one of the chairs and I handed him my ID. The pharmacist was about to give him a hard time again, but he then pointed in my direction. All he saw was a lost adult drooling and bleeding, clearly out of it, fresh out of surgery. And the look on his face was just glorious. He handed my brother my medication without much complaint, and we left. And before anyone gets onto my brother's case that he didn't need to drag me into the store, I want to make it clear, even then, I did not care about how silly I looked. I was too busy thinking about pink axolotls on stairs and how bad I needed a nap. Even looking back, I chuckle about it. OP added a couple of edits down at the bottom. The first one says, "So I want to clear up a couple of things. We're not mad at the pharmacist or anything, mildly annoyed at the most. We did not know that the painkillers would be narcotics. Since I always pick up my dad's medication, none of us saw any reason as to why they suddenly needed my ID for my meds. Then my brother dropped me back at the motel, story for another day. I just plopped onto the bed and my brother gave my dad my meds to make sure I took them. My dad saw that the meds were narcotics and he explained to us what they were. Was I listening to that conversation? Heck no, I was out like a light." Edit number 2 says, "Thank you all so much for your insights and sharing your experiences. As much as I would love to respond to everyone, I should not be on Reddit too much because I'm still trying to put myself first for my mental health. So after today, I won't be responding as much. Just know that if you have been through similar situations, my heart goes out to you. Thank you for the support." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Puzzled Velociraptor. It says, "In my state, ID isn't required. However, at my chain retail location, it is required from the person in front of me. Anyone the patient trusts can pick up the meds. We need to scan the pickup person's ID for safety reasons. People have claimed to have not gotten their meds before, and this ensures we know who picked them up just in case. It sucks that you went through that. Wish it was a similar policy where he could have just shown his ID so you didn't have to go in." OP responded and said, "Yeah, it's pretty annoying, but there wasn't really much else we could have done. I'm not too upset about it. I go to the pharmacy a lot to pick up my dad's and my own medications, so we didn't really give it too much thought. This comment was very insightful to help give me more understanding." Alright, so I think we all understand, and it's been drilled home a few times, about the pharmacist having to have ID to hand out a narcotic. That makes sense. But the pharmacist could have brushed up on their customer service skills in this case to let OP's brother know why it had to be done. In the end though, OP's brother did extract a solution and everything turned out okay. This story comes to us from MD Lapla, using tennis balls as malicious compliance. "I go to tennis classes at the local club twice a week. One of the other alumni on the class is a 50-year-old gardener. Cool guy, has been working in the business since he was like 20. We live in a smallish town, so a lot of people know him and he has worked for quite a few in town over the years. He's generally well liked and friends with mostly everybody. There's one thing he does wrong about his business. He trusts people a lot, to the point that sometimes he agrees on a price for some work without drafting a contract. He goes, does the job, and gets paid. The old handshakes and word are enough contract if you know the other guy school of thought. Right next to the tennis courts, there's a house with a big garden. One day, one of us overhit a ball and it ended up in said garden. Nothing out of the ordinary, it could happen. After the class, Gardner told us that the owner of said house owes him a lot of money because a couple of years ago he did a complete remodel and overhaul of the garden, and when he finished, the house owner asked him for a couple more days for payment. Those days turned into weeks, then turned into owner not returning Gardner phone calls. But since no contract was signed, Gardner couldn't go to the police about it, or at least he couldn't legally do anything about it. So he had an argument with the owner once when he ran into him. Owner straight up said he wasn't going to pay, and then he said, "What are you gonna do? Go ahead, try to make my garden a mess just like it was. You can't set foot on my property or I'll call the cops on you." Gardner ended up assuming the money was lost and moved on with it. A couple of classes after Gardner told us the story, Coach told us that they had to change the tennis balls since they were old and barely bouncy anymore. They do this like every couple months or so. There are around 3 to 4 carts with between 80 to 100 tennis balls per cart. Gardner asked Coach what he was going to do with the old ones since there's no recycling program for tennis balls in town or nearby. Coach said, "I am probably going to toss them in the trash." Gardner asked Coach if he had no problem giving the balls to him after class. Coach said no, he was intrigued. After the class was finished, Gardner gathered the carts and began tossing all the balls to the house's garden. The rest of the class, Coach included, who also heard the story that Gardner told, understood and began helping. We threw around 300 something balls into Owner's garden. Owner showed up a couple of minutes later to complain, shouting, "Hey, you're doing it on purpose, making a mess of my garden," until he saw Gardner. He went mute, turned around, and left. Local police came a couple minutes later. Officer knows Gardner and chats with him for a couple of minutes. Then officer tells us there's a complaint about people tossing balls at the house. Coach smiles and says, "You know, they're learning, overhits happen." Officer smiles and says, "You're absolutely right, part of learning." Turns around and leaves. It has now become a tradition. Every time the club has to change the tennis balls, Coach makes sure Gardner gets all of the carts for a ceremonial game of tennis basketball, with Owner's garden being the bucket. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Viernine. It says, "He didn't have a written contract, but he still had a contract and can prove he did the work. Owner had to let him onto his property. The gardener shouldn't have just let it go." Alright, so I understand this was a crime of opportunity where they had the balls and they were able to throw them into the garden. But if the gardener really wanted to cause an issue, you can actually buy balls online that are full of seeds of weeds and wildflowers, and the balls break when you throw them up in the air and they come down and hit the ground. Oh, I don't know, 10, 15 of those into that garden would probably take care of the complete garden for many years to come. Of course, as usual on this channel, this is not legal advice. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. Boss wants more words on the comment for each ticket solved. Engineer writes a novel. I've been working on IT for around 25 to 26 years now. Different companies, but you see quite a bit of malicious compliance in the IT world. Back in 2005-2006, I worked for a telephone company, a huge one that had the typical Jira-like bug reporting tool for one of its most complicated and convoluted softwares. The software was so complex, so legacy, that even the department team in-house was afraid to do changes in it. Some updates in the past did backfire spectacularly more than once, so even the tiniest update to that software had to take weeks of analysis before taking place. In that dev team worked 3 of my friends from college. I worked on another one that had an easier life. One of my guys at that team was Badoo. To portrait Badoo accurately, imagine that guy that's always planning innocent pranks, that you never know if he's for real or if he's faking, because he's always saying the most shocking things just for the lulz. Knows a little bit of magic, uses it to prank, loves football as well. He used to be good at his job, but he's also quite a bit tired of it, procrastinating, and generally not putting too much effort in on it. The fact that he's part of that software dev team doesn't help. It's not a fast-paced environment, and people get bored by the inaction. So since he's bored, he plays pranks, like connecting a second wireless mouse controller to the PC of a colleague to randomly move the mouse and have him call tech support because his mouse misbehaves, but do absolutely nothing with the mouse when tech support comes. The guy being the target of the prank ended up calling tech support 4 times before being told what was going on. The team once a week also books a windowless meeting room for an hour, so 3 of them can take a nap while the 4th one guards against someone finding out. Who's the guard rotates each week. The requests for update Badoo gets are almost always something in this style. This report indicates that X value is 25 when it should be 27, please fix. Each request typically comes from a different area, but each area sends a couple of requests probably once a month. But Badoo knows that the algorithm doing that calculation is extremely complex. Reports are baked on a monthly basis on batch processes that can take hours. Testing this is extremely painful also, so he updates the end value on the report, where it was 25, now is 27. Easy peasy, see you next month. He gets probably like 10 to 15 of these requests per day. Badoo updates the bug tool ticket stating on the comment field something like end value verified and corrected and moves on. New boss comes to that dev team from another team on the company. He's well known around the company as being quite dense. He instantly clashes with the team. He thinks quantity equals quality and loves to look into numbers. He comes from the database world, so he's constantly using queries to gather information. He also thinks that each ticket solved is because the underlying condition is being solved. He knows nothing about the complexity of the system. He just thinks that the team is really good at identifying causes and solving them fast. Glorified pencil pusher. He gathers the team and says that he did a query and found out that the comments being put into the bug tool are really short, like less than 50 characters long, and that is not long enough to explain what has been done to solve the incident. The whole team explains that what's being put into the comment field is more than enough. He says that comments should, at least, have 1,000 characters. It's the minimum he'll accept. He says that having comments with less than 1,000 characters will impact his valuation of the work being done. Badoo, being the devious character he is, decides to complain, especially since he knows that the boss would never open the bug tool. He loves his databases. First ticket comes in, this value is this, should be that. He updates the value, writes the same comment he always does, end value verified and corrected, and then, taking advantage of the fact that the comment field has format capabilities, what you see is what you get type of editor, copies and pastes the chronicle from the latest football match into the field, changes the color to white and the font size to 1 so it can't be seen against the background on the tool, and closes the ticket. If you're the original ticket poster, that comment field is read only, so unless someone selects and highlights the comment, they won't know that something else is there. Next ticket comes, does the same, but writes a rant about some stupid thing. Then on the next ticket, he just keeps pushing random keys and the spacebar until the character count reaches 1,000. He gets bored doing this, so he becomes more ingenious and inventive by the ticket. Somewhere, hidden in that bug tool comment section, a complete original Badoo novel separated in small chapters ends up being written that no one knows about, outside of a few of us that have lunch with Badoo and the team. Boss comes a month after and says to Badoo, I've noticed that the size of your comments has gone up last month. You're averaging well over 1,000 characters per ticket. Keep it up. Badoo, plus all my other friends and myself, left the company to greener pastures a year later. I still talk daily with Badoo and people from that team. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Aldwin Lagaya. It says, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but the new boss is supposed to be a database guy, but doesn't look at the comments. The font size and color doesn't matter. When you queried the database, it would show the full text. OP responded and said, he was more interested in the amount of characters, something like select length, comment text from comments. Another user down below called Feuerkopf said, so your friend decides to hardcode exceptions rather than address the underlying issue, and when a manager wants more detailed comments to catch that exact type of behavior, he finds a way to cheat. Wouldn't it be more honest just to write, in order to genuinely fix that, I need about 15 man-hours, please advise on how to proceed. You know, I kind of agree with the second commenter in this one because they were just finding a way around what they were doing. They weren't fixing the actual problem. Just changing that end character, well, doesn't really fix the issue. It means that every time they run that specific report, they're always going to come up with the wrong information because they didn't fix the underlying issue. So I guess they kind of have a point here. They were skirting around what the boss wanted to be done, and if they'd done what the boss said, put the hours in, they could have made it so they would never have to fix it again. This story comes to us from Green Lily 58. You want to know what I'm doing? So this recent mail sent out to US government employees sent me on a trip down memory lane. Back in 2000, I was in an apprenticeship, which in my country lasts 2.5 to 3 years. About a year in, I got overwhelmed since all of my coworkers dropped work on me. My boss then put in 2 rules. 1, everything had to go through my instructor before I did anything. 2, I had to compile a list of what I did every day and how long it took me. While I enjoyed number 1, I thought number 2 was a bit too much, so I asked if they really meant everything I did. My boss said yes. So the first mail she got looked like this. 1, turning on lights, 3 minutes. 2, starting computer, 1 minute. 3, turning on printer and other machines, 2 minutes. 4, preparing coffee maker, 3 minutes. 5, walking between offices in total, 10 minutes, etc. Every single thing I did except the bathroom breaks were listed, and the last was how long it took to write the mail. The next day, she asked me to limit it to the most important tasks, which I had to do for the rest of my time there, even after the boss changed. But they also made sure to give me exact instruction, because when they didn't, well... Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Trip6is6i6x. It says, not detailed enough. You should have listed the specific other machines you turn on, along with times for them, and absolutely also listed bathroom breaks, along with whether you pooped or just peed. This information is vital for management. Don't leave it out. Another commenter down below called CoderJoe1 said, I don't mind accounting for my time as long as they're realistic about the granularity of it. OP responded and said, yeah, but it was a waste of time, especially since I already had to fill out a mandatory weekly report for the Chamber of Commerce, which in my country monitors office apprenticeships that my boss had to sign off. We've seen stories like this on Malicious Compliance so many times now where people had to document things and they went into severe details. OP on this one sounds like they just followed the rules. They didn't bring it down to the little itty bitty tasks and make sure that all of that was written down. So yes, I agree with the commenter. Make sure your bathroom breaks are recorded as well. I don't think you need to tell them what you did in there, but how much time you spent there, sure. How much time you spent walking to the bathroom. How much time you spent walking back from the bathroom. Break it down completely. Make sure that doing that log takes a good quarter of your day. Then they might see that it doesn't need to be done. This story comes to us from Scissorfella. Turn my camera on? Fine. In 2021, I was working on a project with this manager called Mark, who was a real stickler for the rules. He was the kind of dude who wouldn't allow chit-chat in his team and loved an office day more than anything, despite the fact that our team was external and all of us lived crazy far away. I've got a chronic disease which, at the time, was kept relatively under control with infusions at the hospital every few weeks. Seeing as Mark didn't want to chit-chat, he wasn't aware that I live with this disease. One day, I was in the hospital working from the bed with a cannula in one arm. We had our daily meeting planned, and I figured it would be fine to call in without my camera, as they could still hear me just fine, and I didn't want to freak anyone out with the infusion line in the picture and whatnot. I get onto the call, and Mark immediately comments that he can't see my face. I tell him that I've not got my camera on today, and don't elaborate, figuring that it's a 15-minute call, and I could just as easily be driving or something. Mark responds by asking me to stay back on the call after we finish. I comply, and he chews me out for not turning on my camera, saying that it's a rule, and that we all need to show our faces. Fine. I turn on my camera and watch his face go from red to white as he sees me in what is very clearly a hospital room. I tell him I'm uncomfortable being on camera while I'm getting treatment, also not elaborating on what it's for. His sweaty little face still brings me joy. It was a really nice moment to bask in, and I think about it pretty often when I get managers who like rules just a little too much. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Jay Stone. It says, the only way that could have been better is if you turned it on in the meeting and caused him to get sweaty-faced in front of everybody on the call. OP responded and said, ha ha ha, darn, he would have deserved that too. Another commenter down below called Another Crap Historian said, any manager who always thinks that everyone on their team is trying to get one over on them needs retraining. These aren't children, and you're not daddy. Trust the people you work with. I can completely see this one from both sides of the story. I know OP didn't want to turn on their camera so that they wouldn't have to show that they were in a hospital room, and have to give an explanation while there were a whole bunch of other people in the meeting. So that makes sense. But I do feel like OP could have handled it a little bit differently. They could have said something to the boss like, hey, I can't be on camera today, and if you'd like to discuss that after the meeting, by all means, we can do that. I wouldn't have just said, I'm not turning on my camera today, especially if it's something that's required for your meetings. So I can see the point of view of the boss going, this isn't how we do meetings here. You're supposed to have your camera on. And they berated you at the end because you didn't, but you didn't give them any clear explanation or tell them that I'll give you an explanation later. So again, I can see both sides of this one, but I'd love to know what you guys think. So if you're on YouTube, make sure you comment down below. And if you're on Spotify, you can comment on this one there as well, and let me know what you think. This story comes to us from Chickenpox Party. Constituent complies with Compelled Speech is Not Free Speech Act bill while testifying before legislature committee. Not sure if I should just post the article or relay the info in it, but I'm trying to actually non-maliciously follow the rules here. So I'll just type the story myself. Anyways, I thought this was a prime example of malicious compliance. Basically, the Wyoming legislature recently passed an act which says no state employee can be compelled or required to use someone else's preferred pronouns. The act, SF-77, is called the Compelled Speech is Not Free Speech Act. A constituent was testifying before the committee, which was meeting to discuss the What is a Woman Act, another ridiculous piece of legislature with a ridiculous name. The constituent, named Britt, is called on to speak by Senator Tim French, a Republican who voted yes on the aforementioned SF-77. He is the chairman of this committee, and yes, he's a man who is cisgender. Britt says, "Thank you, Madam Chairman," as the Senate overwhelmingly voted, before she is cut off by Senator French, who does exactly what we hope, corrects her, and asserts that he would prefer to be called Mr. Chairman or Chairman French. She of course reminds him of the recent act that was just passed, saying that she cannot be compelled to refer to him by his preferred pronouns or titles. Obviously, Mrs. French and other GOP lawmakers had intended for the spirit of this law to be an affront to trans people, and had hoped and expected that it would only be used to support disrespecting others. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called mbiddy828. It says, "There were a few family gatherings this year about this. Why are pronouns such a big deal? People are too sensitive these days. It's just words. So I would start calling my uncles ladies, and all they would do is glare." OP responded and said, "And the thing is, pronouns truly are not a big deal. It's a minuscule request that costs nothing to oblige. If someone refuses to oblige, they're just being rude, and that's that. No one is going to jail, being fined, or prosecuted whatsoever over pronouns. The only ones who really feel like it's a big deal are the ones spending all this time and effort passing these lame, petty laws that protect them from obliging this mundane request." Does anybody else think that there's not enough SPF 50 on the planet for that burn? I mean, come on. My whole view on the pronoun things is it's all about respect. If you want to identify as something and you want to be called that, then I'm going to call you that because that's what you want. Because I respect you and the way you want to live your life. There's just way too many people out there who are very concerned over how other people live their lives, when in all honesty, other people's lives don't have much effect on ours, and a little bit of respect goes a long way. This story comes to us from Red Girl. "Thanks for my master's degree." I used to work for a manager who was just terrible. All she was good for was approving time off. She spent most of her work time planning her vacations, delegating her actual work, and taking credit for her employees' work. And she would travel on the company dime to seminars and conferences and come back with no work-related information to share, but tons of stories about her work trip. She also did not believe in developing her staff. Opportunity for additional training, education, or certifications? Not for us. But she would go out of her way to take those opportunities for herself, and then give up on them as soon as she realized she would have to do the work. I had requested some in-house training that would have opened up some career opportunities for me, and she kept making excuses for why I couldn't get the trainings. It's not in the budget, we can't spare you, etc. Because she was my manager, it was completely up to her to approve it. Well, the training was $1,500, and it included the tuition, the books, and the certification testing. I finally gave up on asking and decided to apply to a graduate program in a related field to the training I wanted. Because tuition reimbursement was a company benefit and didn't require manager approval, I got accepted and submitted my tuition reimbursement to the company for the following 2 years. In the end, the company ended up paying for my graduate degree to the tune of $12,000, all because my crappy boss wouldn't approve in-house training for $1,500. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called ItchyAppeal9020. It says, "Not excusing your manager, but I could see something like that happening at my company. Actually, I would encourage employees to take advantage of the corporate benefits. I often don't have room in my baseline budget for my employees to take training, but the cost of enterprise-wide programs doesn't hit my budget at all." Another commenter down below called Rather Be Warm says, "Sometimes management just doesn't see what the additional training or degree will bring. I worked for a company that would reimburse tuition for certain degrees. I was an IT manager with an undergrad in business. My job became more of managing costs, projects, software and hardware, purchases, and maintenance. So I went for my MBA. I had to fight to get a 50% reimbursement. A friend who was an integrated circuit designer and manager had a BS and MS, EE, and MBA, and he wanted to get a master's in German. The company refused. He gave all the application notes and patents he'd been working on with our German subsidiary back to his manager and said, 'Good luck.' They eventually sent him to Germany to manage the subsidiary for 2 years. I can't say this enough, but make sure you know what your company is offering because, as we saw in this story, OP took advantage of a program that the company was offering that most people there probably didn't know about. And if you can get better education and have your company pay for it, it might help you out, not just in that company itself, but in any other company that you decide to apply for in the future. Get as much as you can out of your current employer. Get them to pay for education if it's something they normally do." This story comes to us from Ancient Educator 76. "Score it accurately? No problem. Let's just fail algebra." I truly did think this day was going to go on without incident, malicious compliance-less as the previous 40 days. And then it happened. I get a message from a parent demanding that I accurately score the final exams I graded for my Algebra 1 class, taught to the upper echelon of 8th graders, along with students whose parents won't shut up about not being allowed to take the course. This is an expected call in a way. The district I work for gives students a final exam that's 42 questions long. The final is entered as a raw score out of 42, as a final grade heavily weighted. About 80 homework assignments equals to the same value as the 42 question final. I've been teaching the subject for years under the same administration, most of the time, and they've allowed me to give some grace during the grading process. This grace comes in the way of not entering a final score lower than a 60%, regardless of what score they received. The only way I score it lower is if somebody just doesn't take the exam. It then has to be a 0 score. One particular student, Juan, we'll call him, scored particularly poorly on the exam. Juan is the type of student who always puts things off until last second, rarely completing homework assignments, etc. Behavior-wise, Juan's a saint. He's really a good kid otherwise. He just puts very little effort into paying attention to the instruction during class or even showing up. The rest of the class, 90% or so anyway, score anywhere between 25 and a 35 out of 42. Entering the raw score at a weight of 80% is difficult, but it gets done. For those who score less than a 60% on the test, or about 25 or so, I enter their score as 60 dot whatever your raw score was. Meaning, if someone scored a 13 or a 31% on the test, their score would read 60.13 or 60.31 respectively. I don't advertise this to the kids, but they're aware of the system. I have done this for tests where students truly bombed it. There's no retakes for the finals, however, and Juan scored a 15 out of 42, roughly 35.7%. I entered his score as 60.36 and went about my semester. His parents saw his grade change significantly. At first, I was unsure how he, who didn't do homework, had his parents thinking he scored an 80% in the early parts of the semester. I found out that he had screenshot a grade from like week 1 and used that to show them. So when the dad called, he said, "Hey, you messed up grading Juan's score on the final. You're supposed to be an MAFF teacher, man." He then continued to berate OP pretty handily until he tried to interrupt him to explain the grading process. I finally got to explain that he scored 15 out of 42 and explained that the score of 60.36 wasn't his score, but much, much worse. He didn't seem to understand, and no, language wasn't a concern for him. He painted the phone call with many vibrant colors. He finally said to me after cussing me out, "You need to score this test accurately. Change the grade now." Well, seeing as you put it that way, enter Malicious Compliance. I knew that taking a final grade and changing it from a 60.36% to a 35.71% was going to result in a failing grade in both the overall course grade as well as the obvious final grade. And it did. I took pictures along the way to show how the scores affect the grades. I pressed delete 5 times, then entered 35.71 as his percentage score out of 100. The class being failed became a major issue for everybody. The principal had to get involved to communicate with the parents, with me there to meet as well, and only then did they seem to understand what I was saying all along. OP was trying to do Juan a favor here, but what it comes down to is that Juan has not proven by any means that he's mastered any of the Algebra 1 content, so he's going to have to retake the course. Juan's dad seemed very apologetic at that meeting. He wound up ruining the process for every future final grade. It also wound up shining a light on the whole process, and that if the proficiency bar was 55%, why was any other student required to score higher than that to be considered passing? The district notoriously waited to set the measure of proficiency on the exam until after students had taken it, and not surprisingly, the proficiency level was very close to what the average score was district-wide. Over time, I realized that this district, the whole education system, and especially me, were nothing more than a mere joke, living in another man's dream, as Dave Chappelle so eloquently put it. Sorry, Juan. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Former Fly. It says, "I'm sorry, but allowing people to pass who have no business passing is what causes problems in society as uneducated people become adults and enter the workforce without being able to do basic reading and math." OP responded and said, "The process was not as nefarious as it is on paper. We were required to put their raw score as a grade in the system, despite the district saying 55% was proficient district-wide. People had a hard time with reconciling those facts, so they allowed us ways to help the grades along, like entering a second final grade as a performance score, which was 100 for a highly proficient score of 35 out of 42 or greater, 90 for 30 to 34, 80 for 25 to 29, 70 for 15 to 24, and anything less is a 60. This was an additional grade on top of the other one, essentially changing the weight of the final. The system where I added the raw score as a decimal, I've done my whole career. For assignments, kids got full credit for completion, but I wanted them to know that they missed a question. Also wrote on the papers I handed back. 99.9% of the time, those scores were negligible differences for the kids. The kids I taught were focused and tried their hardest to understand. It was the rare student that really shouldn't have been in an advanced math class that desperately needed that life preserver. This whole thing's pretty wild to me because back when I was in school, if you got a failing grade, you got a failing grade, and you'd have to go back and do that course again. Or some students would have to go back and do a whole year of courses over again, and that's just how it was. These days, we don't do that anymore, and I have some personal views on that one that I don't think I should make public on this channel, but that's for another day and another time, maybe. This story comes to us from Emmy is Me. Carefully study these two files and tell me what's going on here. I'm very sorry that I'm bad at being brief, but I'm going to be cackling about this one for a while. Background: I work for a company that does work for HOAs. Yes, they do suck, but I like being able to afford my bills, so a lot of HOAs have management companies that give them a manager to advise them on stuff. This is who gets our bills. At one point, one of the managers at one of these companies was looking to leave, and my boss, in all of her brilliance, ignored me when I said he's not the right type of person for her to work with. She's difficult, and needs employees who can stand up to her without challenging her. And he's a challenger. She hired him anyway because his background appealed to her. After 2 months of my life being hell trying to train someone who thinks he knows more than me but can't use a computer, she got sick of him challenging her on everything and fired him. He started his own management company and went after some of our clients that hadn't found management yet, so we still have to interact with him. Both clients he landed were absolute messes with past due balances that meant we stopped doing work for them until they get caught up. The story. We sent him all the past due invoices for both clients when he took them on at the end of last year, and have not done any real work for either since. He keeps emailing and asking for meetings to discuss the billing and then doesn't pay it, but comes back and complains that they got another bill because we billed them for the meeting time. This is very standard in our industry. Yesterday, he decided for some reason to involve me, and he should not have done that. He and my boss have been going back and forth in emails for hours and have racked up thousands of words back and forth about how we've explained this billing to him so many times, we aren't going to spend any more time on it. Yes, she's actively arguing with him while telling him she's not going to spend any more time on him. That's when he comes back with, carefully study these 2 files and tell me how last month this client had a balance of $5,100 and this month they have a balance of $8,400. The compliance. So I opened both files. Remember when I said he got 2 of our clients to sign on with him? The $5,100 balance was for the other client. So I shot back with, please note, the $5,100 invoice is for client B, not client A, as you have attributed. Please see attached email from December with all outstanding invoices for client A up until that point, and a second email from January with the newest invoice for the time we spent explaining the billing and providing the invoices in December. In an effort to assist you with your accounting, I have also attached an account summary for client A. Just a reminder that client A and client B are 2 separate clients, and their accounting should be accordingly handled separately. Suddenly, he is very sorry for the confusion, and will go back over all the documentation before letting us know his findings. Moral of the story, don't go full bore on an argument if you aren't absolutely sure some admin somewhere isn't going to step in and destroy you with one email after hours of acting like we don't know what we're doing. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, I realize in my attempt to be somewhat vague, I didn't really relay the implications or fallout here. I work for lawyers, and this man handed us proof that he's potentially mishandling client funds by mishandling their accounting. Since the clients are all non-profits, that means their funds are held in trust accounts, which have a lot of flaws and red tape involved. So if he's charging the wrong clients for vendor invoices, there's likely some legal recourse. At the very least, he is likely to lose the only 2 clients we know he has, and struggle to find new ones since we will recommend any client considering him not to, and our client pools are mostly a circle on a Venn diagram. Since the attorneys have been battling with him about this for months, no one else was opening anything he sent anymore, because we had provided everything he could possibly have needed multiple times, so we couldn't figure out what he was still arguing, and were already considering going directly to the client, but didn't have anything tangible. It wasn't until that line in his email irked me enough to get directly involved that I figured out he handed us a giant red flag to potentially get legal proceedings involved, which wouldn't have been noticed by anyone if I hadn't maliciously complied with this specific demand. Now, OP did update this one as well. It says, update, it's fairly boring as an update, but he did finally respond with very few words. He said the client had accepted the credit my boss had offered before he proved his incompetence, and was sending payment. Since both clients had been difficult before his involvement, we will be terminating them both as clients once he brings them current, and didn't argue the credit, so I likely won't have any further updates, as I won't be kept privy to whether or not they cite their choice of manager and his incompetence as to why we won't be working with them anymore. But ultimately, I'm about to lose 3 headaches. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Mr. ECS. It says, your new competitor isn't going to last long, and with screw-ups like that, could very well find himself facing lawsuits. OP responded and said, "Oh, he's not a competitor. Him and his company folding won't affect us in any way. We had the clients before he was involved, and we'll have clients after he's involved. Unfortunately for him, we're his client's lawyers. I assume one of the attorneys involved will inform the clients of how his incompetence is the reason we can't finish our work for either of them. So I would be surprised if both clients don't decide to find new management soon." So what we're seeing here is that this guy went out in business on his own and doesn't know how to do a darn thing in that business. His accounting is completely messed up and he is just going to fail miserably. You know, some people dig their own graves, and it seems like that's what's happening in this case. This story comes to us from Inexact Cave 8264. Followed health and safety, coworker complained. So I got two stories here for y'all, both from the same job and within a month of each other. The story begins with me working at a large grocery store chain as a cart pusher. Day in, day out, I would be outside bringing carts in. That position had the single highest turnover rate in the entire store. We had to bring all the carts in manually without one of those electric pushers. Because I had other duties as well, helping cashiers, we would often be bringing in anywhere from 7 to 15 carts a load. Health and safety stated that we were not to do more than 5 a load. I was a naive teenager. Plenty of my coworkers developed back problems, and one of the cashiers started giving me painkillers out of pocket so I wouldn't complain. When regional visited, they pulled from another department to make sure it looked like we were following code. I took the issue to the union rep, but she was a supervisor who didn't care. I took it to my department's manager, and she told me I'm welcome to find a new job. So I did just that. About a year into COVID, I decided enough is enough, and I'm not breaking my back for minimum wage. I put my 2 weeks in the moment another job lined up. For those last 2 weeks, I followed health and safety to the letter. 5 carts a load. Suddenly, ever reliable me was hardly ever in the store. I remember one day towards the end, I got called into the manager's office for a complaint. One of my coworkers complained that I wasn't pulling my weight and he had to pick up the slack. I told them that I'm simply following the safe limit as stated by the guidelines. I could see the steam coming from boss man's ears, but he couldn't do anything. He told the other guy that I was right and he would send someone else from a different department to help. That was one of the most satisfying days of that horrid job. The second one happened about a month before, again during peak COVID. We were allowed 1.5 hours of paid leave during scheduled hours to get our shots, mandated by the local government. This was when I was already looking for a new job, so I had no real love for the store. I scheduled my shot on the busiest day of the week, just after my half-hour unpaid lunch. As we were instructed, I told my immediate supervisor about it when I walked in. It was the union rep supervisor. No issues. I go for my break around noon, no issues. I come back down to the store floor and get told by the supervisor that carts need to be done urgently. I tell her I can't because I'm getting my shot, as we discussed this morning. She asked me why I couldn't do it during my break. A smile shot across my face as I informed her that I'm just following the mandate and that she would have to deal with the carts in my stead. She was furious but relented. I got my shot within 20 minutes and spent the rest of my paid leave eating a pizza. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called CoderJoe1. It says, I take my hat off to a proven cardiologist. Don't let anyone push you around. Another commenter down below called Catless Boy Mom said, as a fellow cart mule, sorry, parking lot attendant, I applaud you. I spent the summer pushing carts at 16. If we had safety regs back then, I never knew it. They gave us a rope to hold the line of carts together. It maxed out at 20 carts. I started only being able to do 5 or 6. By the end of the summer, I had legs and glutes of steel and could do 20 easily. 90 to 100 degree heat with minimal water breaks. Definitely not a job I would want to do again. Congrats on moving on from there. So a funny story on this one, I worked at a grocery store as my first job when I was around 16 years old as well, and I was a front-end service clerk, which is pretty much the same job that they're doing here. You bring the carts in from outside, and you help people at the front bagging stuff if you need it, and whatever else they really ask you to do. Although my job description said I was to bring in carts and bag groceries. Now, one of the assistant managers in this store kinda had it out for me for some reason, I don't really know why, and would always ask me to do things that weren't listed in my duties. Like when somebody crapped all over the bathroom, like they managed to get it everywhere but the toilet, I was tasked with going to clean that up. And being the naive little guy that I was at the time, I went back there and did it, because it was my job, or at least I thought so. A little later on, when I realized that I didn't have to do all those things, I kind of fought back a little bit. And when I was asked to clean puke off of a cash register at one point that definitely wasn't in my job description, I told them I wasn't going to do it. And the boss said, well, if you're not going to do it, then you can leave. And so I turned around, flipped them the bird, and walked out the door. Not one of my proudest moments, but there you go. There's a story from when I was 16. This story comes to us from Ancient Educator 76. Only teach what's on the test? No problemo. About 2 months ago, I worked for an absolute tyrant of an administrator. Dude was terrible. Terrible enough to warrant me writing in the apparent point of view of a 48-year-old teacher wishing he was Sigma. But I digress. Before working for this school, I was teaching 8th grade math, 4th grade math, or being an academic coach for the previous 18 or so years. I switched school primarily due to location. I found a school on the other side of the mountain I stare at nightly and figured it was a good match. Nope. This admin, we'll call him Poppin' Fresh, shut me down every step of the way. I entered school the middle of the year with very rough kids, and my first day training the academic coach for the school and district trained us up on this math, ELA, anything you want gaming program called Gimkit. I understand that Gimkit is an education in and of itself. It's simply a 5-minute tool to find out if kids know the content, and it engages the kids greatly. My first day with students, I saw their terrible behaviors. They ran 2 other teachers out of there evidently. So I decided it was going to take a little bit of grace to get them to listen to me. I showed them Gimkit. They had popped open their Chromebooks for no more than 30 seconds when TA, terrible admin Poppin' Fresh, came in and shut it down instantly. He never assesses the situation. He just sees kids on hokey-looking activities as he literally pops in the classroom, bouncing around like he's on something. Anyway, this happened all the time. I would instruct for no more than 8 minutes tops and walk around and help them with concepts the best I could. I would be walking around, he would pop in and tell me to change something, like clockwork. Every program or strategy or center-based activity I try to use to get the 7th graders motivated gets shut down instantly. And he finally says out loud, "Teach only what's on the test, nothing more." Bet. I took this as an opportunity to enter some malicious compliance with a side of, I can't believe I'm here. I start going by the book 100%. Anytime a student asks, why don't we do it like this when we are working on surface area and volume, I only say, that's not on the test. Anytime I naturally find an urge to find a connection to other standards, I stop myself. It's not on the test. Over a short amount of time, students are frustrated and sitting there yawning. It pains me greatly, so I decide to only apply malicious compliance when good old Poppin' Fresh pops his way back into my classroom. He finally pops in with his boss, his boss's boss, and a couple of people I've never seen before. I instantly switch from my going deeper, thinking outside the box, activity-based learning to exactly what he wants, teaching only what's on the test. I instantly turn into Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and the kids instantly groan, saying, "Mr. OP, I hate it when you teach us like this." Comments from the students fly about the room. "This is the worst part of my day. I hate math now, thanks." And many much more colorful, expletive-laden commentary. Frank Caliendo even popped in for a spell. Now here's a guy who doesn't know how to motivate students. Boom. Poppin' Fresh even doubled down on his usual banter, putting on a show for his crew of bosses. "These kids seem highly unmotivated, OP. We need to meet about this if you can't get them engaged." I interjected, "You said to only teach what's on the test, so that's what I'm doing. Only what's on the test, right? Like, if they wanted to know why this happens, or that happens, or how to solve this a different way, that's not on the test, right?" You told me just to be up and be teaching and never have them on their Chromebooks, right? I said this to him in definite earshot of his accompanying party, mainly because I had a feeling those were the head honchos, the ones who signed off on spending all the money to make our school a true one-to-one school. A school where every student has a Chromebook. Not utilizing the Chromebooks is something I knew that was something Poppin' Fresh believed in, but I had a feeling that the district would want the kids properly utilizing them. He answered back to me, I only stopped you from using the Chromebooks because the kids were all just playing games. The students interjected, it's a math game. The head honcho moved to Interjection City. Well, let's see what this math game is all about. I had the kids get their Chromebooks. They all excitedly logged on. I pulled up a surface area and volume gimkit, and the kids were feverishly playing the game using pencils and notebooks to solve the problems needed to be answered to gain ammunition in their game. It was active. It was fun for all. I paused the game when needed to show different ways to isolate the variable when solving surface area problems, especially of spheres and cones, etc. It was what education was supposed to be. Poppin' Fresh ran out of pop, and by the end of the day, I received an email from the head honcho himself asking me about him and how things were going. I was honest with him. I told him everything. All things that I'm sure would be an interesting part of this tale, but they aren't related to the malicious compliance inherent here. It's also an ongoing investigation, even 2 months later, as I'm teaching at a new school on the other side of the proverbial mountain. Poppin' Fresh is under investigation for what he's been doing to me and other new teachers to the school, and it's crawling all the way up the chain. Updates to follow. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called 4Dwarf. It says, glad you were able to pop his bubble and freshen him up to the higher-ups. OP responded and said, I see what you did there and there. Another commenter down below called Eerie774IM said, I have so many teacher friends who deal with this kind of effed up micromanaging. The admins want teachers to teach the test, so standardized test scores go up, making it look like the kids are learning the subject when they're just turning into parrots that squawk out answers without understanding the subject. It's teachers like OP who make learning enjoyable and become memorable and important parts of their students' lives. So in this case, it sounds like the students actually wanted to learn and they let that be known. This was actually a huge victory in the classroom, and we don't see this often enough because usually it's just a case of teach what you're told to teach and do it our way, or else you won't be teaching anymore. Well, OP, you've done the best thing you can do for these students. My hat's off to you. This story comes to us from Purple People Treater. Too lazy to do your job? I'll do it better and make more work for you in the process. When I was a lactation nurse almost a decade ago, I was only one of two who covered the whole hospital on nights. Only one of us was there on any given day, and we had to cover mother and baby and women's special care, pediatric special care, newborn ICU, and step down. Our unit director told us the nurse case managers who worked days were too busy to get home breast pumps for patients, even though durable medical equipment was 100% their responsibility and don't do any patient care. At the time, they only ordered pumps for patients that had to be separated from their babies or had some problem like low birth weight. Therefore, it was not that labor intensive, with maybe 2 to 3 patients per shift between 2 case managers needing the pumps. Believe it or not, breastfeeding is way harder at night when new parents are tired, sleep deprived, and trying to nurse a tiny, ravenous night owl. We had to take over the breast pump duty on top of rounding on all the babies, on mother and baby, 24 rooms, any kiddos having problems on other units, and taking pages to help as needed throughout the hospital. We had to verify the patient's address, phone number, etc., and offer them freedom of choice of the company they used to order the pump. Then we would have to go to the doctor on service and ask for a prescription for the pump and get it written before the next day, so case management could fax it over and follow up if needed. They were willing to do just the last steps of the process. As I was passionate about my job but also saucy, I agreed happily. But I didn't just get prescriptions for the higher risk babies. I got prescriptions for every single baby in the hospital who was being breastfed every single shift. I also convinced the other night lactation nurse to do the same thing. We sent every breastfeeding family home with a double electric breast pump. The Affordable Care Act made insurance cover them. The RN case managers had dozens of scripts to fax and follow up on, and the docs and midwives got irritated with us, asking for 15 times more scripts than normal. However, no one could argue with my logic that all breastfeeding people deserve to have a pump that is covered by insurance, and that teaching on how to express milk and give them the tools to do it will increase breastfeeding rates and duration. This was a baby-friendly hospital, a designation that they had to work for to try to attract patients, so anyone who protested looked ridiculous. They eventually made it a standard of care that every breastfeeding family was offered a pump. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called DBY0226. It says, "Good for you. I would not have been able to nurse my son in 1991 without my wonderful night shift nurse who cared about me being able to do it. Day shift didn't take the time to help me. Thank you for all you've done." Another commenter down below called KD Blasted said, "Love this and love and thank you. I'll never forget my lactation helper. Not sure of her title or her name because I was very out of it due to medication. I know she helped me get my baby latched on, and then sometime later I woke up from a groggy nap and she was still there, making sure I didn't drop my nursing baby in my sleep." Can we just do a shout out right here to all the nurses working in our healthcare system? The ones who really keep everything moving there. I mean, come on, we know you guys are the backbone of the system. And you've done a lot for us. You see a lot of people on their best days and a lot of people on their worst days, and I honestly don't know how you do it. So again, my hat's off to you. You guys are amazing and keep up what you do. This story comes to us from Think Trouble 9616. "You want to fire me? Oh, yes, please." I don't know if this is malicious compliance enough, but I like this sub too much, and I've never done anything remotely close before, so here it is. I joined a startup's AI team, which consisted of just 3 people including myself, with the other 2 being more senior. We spent about a year developing a product that was gaining traction with new clients. Then, everything changed when our CEO decided that regular team-based sprints, basically once-a-day check-ins, weren't effective enough. Instead, every team member had to become a head of a project, organizing, managing, and running separate daily scrums. Typically, each of us was assigned to 4 to 6 different scrums, completely destroying any sensible resource planning. This was the breaking point for 2 senior members in my team, who promptly decided to quit. I tried to stick it out, but the CEO started giving me crap all of a sudden. I believe he was holding a grudge because I once didn't answer my phone at 6:29 p.m. when work ended at 6:30 p.m. I called him at 7, but apparently that wasn't enough. After that, instead of talking to me directly, he would just speak to one of the seniors who hadn't yet announced his resignation, and that senior was supposed to relay that to me. But he was ready to quit and wasn't really that helpful. And with the work management going nuts, everything was just going to crap. I mean, engineering becomes crappy if you don't know the intentions, but he just kept giving me tasks without an explanation. So I had a one-on-one with the CEO and asked him to tell me what he wants directly. This suggestion set him off. He implied that this isn't working out, clearly suggesting my time at the company was coming to an end. Knowing what I knew about our codebase being built in LangChain and runnables, notorious for their poor readability, and that, well, all of the members are quitting, well, I liked this sub too much to let this go. About a week after receiving this message, the 2 seniors quit. That was about a year ago. I now saw them putting out a news article, first PR they've done so far since I left. Yep, the entire project that we developed for about a year, gone, and replaced with something completely new and generic. Can't say I'm not happy seeing that product crumble. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Kiki How. It says, "Not that I wish harm on people, but sometimes it's nice to see something fail after you haven't been treated well." Another commenter down below called Blame the Punk said, "This isn't working out. Yeah, you're correct. You haven't the slightest idea what you're doing, and I'm glad I'm not gonna be on this sinking ship. Peace." Don't you love it when a boss comes in and decides that they need to micromanage every single little thing you do? It sounds like that's what happened here. And all that hard work that OP put in, well, they didn't get to see the result. because the company was so badly ran that they decided to jump ship. OP, I don't blame you one bit, and I really do hope that you found another place to work at where the manager actually appreciates you for everything you do. This story comes to us from Solo Pilot 2497. He asked for a certain type of photo, so I sent him exactly what he asked for. A customer at work earlier this week left his number for me after we had a bit of flirty banter while I took his order. I'm not looking for anything at the moment, and he also looked quite a bit younger than I am. I generally get aged at about 10 to 15 years younger than I am. So I messaged him to be polite and to tell him that I'm actually this age. He says that doesn't matter. I don't hear from him for 24 hours and figure, okay, that's done. I finished work last night and see that I have a text from him. He's asking for saucy photos. So of course, I walk over to the sports bar and take a photo of the tray of sauces we have sitting there and send that to him. 24 hours later and no response. Gosh darn, such a loss. What on earth will I do with myself now? But I have loved laughing at the comments today. You guys, girls, aliens, etc. are all brilliant. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Diana Mistress. It says, I had someone ask for a photo of my, cat? So I sent him a photo of my cat. He said, no, your other one. So I sent him a picture of my other cat. He blocked me after that, but I was locked and loaded with a picture of my third cat. Another commenter down below called WorthAd3223 said, I was once asked for an eggplant pic. I was hilariously at a barbecue with my wife at the time. She got inspired and put a bratwurst in the fly of my shorts and took a picture while she was taking a bite. The comment was, getting circumcised now. Strangely, I didn't hear from her again. My wife was pleased. The funny thing to me on this one is I haven't been in the dating scene for about 20 years, so I don't really know how things go these days, but I can't imagine that being my opening line to somebody when I send them a message, because that just seems really forward. But in this case, I think it also lets you know what type of person that is. And if you don't like that type of person, you're free to just not respond, turn the other way, and run as fast as possible. So this person's just really showing you their personality. You can actually thank them for that, and so that you don't have to waste your time. This story comes to us from Ars Tarok. Be careful what you scream for. I work as a support manager for a company that sells credit card readers and other services for processing money. Our story starts with a phone call that one of our newest staff members received. The caller does not introduce themselves, and instead loudly demands to speak to no less than the CEO of the company, and will not give any information aside from his repeated demands and some indirect swearing. Normally, this would earn them a terminated call, but I want to know who has the balls to scream at my staff, so I have him transferred over. Having had some of these calls before, I introduce myself with a very fancy title, and ensure the caller that whatever his support needs are, I can handle them without any issue. The CEO is busy at the moment, and I am next in line in the support organization. This is not entirely true, but it works to calm people down and get them to tell me what is actually wrong. The caller is named Steve. Not just any Steve, mind you, but Steve, the owner of Steve's Cafe. And not just one Steve's Cafe, mind you, but the owner of all 7 Steve's Cafes. Steve is offended that he was given to me and not the CEO like he demanded. He is the owner, you see, and needs to talk to my owner, not me. I don't own 7 cafes, and I certainly don't own my company, so I can't understand Steve's needs, and can't make the hard choices he needs made. I again assure him that I do have the position and authority to do anything he requires. I am the manager of the support department. I can make any changes he requires. I can set up new accounts or order new devices, anything. He only needs to tell me his problems, and I will provide solutions. I will support him. The words are immediate and aggressive. Can you cancel my accounts? Well, yes, I can. I inform him that we need a written request to cancel. I also try to inquire why he needs to cancel his accounts. This is standard procedure. If he wants to close his accounts, then we close his accounts, but any feedback is useful. Is he leaving because our product was bad? Because our service was bad? Because he found a better deal? But before I can get more than a few words out, he shouts again, "Have the CEO call me, he has my number," and he disconnects. I report this up the chain. No email means no cancellation, but still, bosses need to know. First thing next morning, I get invited to an emergency meeting by the CEO, as well as a few other pertinent admins. We go over what happened. Then I am shown an email. Steve managed to find the CEO's internal email address and sent him an email complaining about one of his 7 stores having a horrible time with the product. He is demanding no less than the cancellation of all his accounts and a refund for 3 months of payments he has made for each, as the product is totally unusable. I checked the logs. The problem location does indeed have a problem. That started yesterday morning. They're not down, but they are having a hard time. There are no emails or calls informing us, just the screaming cancellation request. I send over the call logs, and we listen to Steve scream and curse at the support agent before he got sent to me. And then I hear 2 words that cue the malicious compliance. Cancel them. The meeting goes quiet. The CEO has spoken. We cancel all 7 accounts and shut down services. They start their day with devices that do not work. The calls come in. Again, the CEO speaks. That account is canceled. Follow procedure. So each manager calls me frantically explaining that nothing is working. The staff apologetically tell them that their account was canceled per their owner's email. We can no longer provide support. Shortly thereafter, the owner calls in, once again screaming to turn them back on. Uncancel them this instant. Get the devices working. He's losing money. I check with the CEO, and after receiving a nod, I say, "Per your request made over the phone yesterday and your email this morning, your accounts have been canceled." Steve just gets madder and says he didn't mean to actually cancel them. He just wanted to let us know what would happen if we didn't fix his issue. He continues to yell. I let the CEO know, and at his request, I transfer Steve to his office phone. I wish there was a satisfying end to the story, but Steve and our boss talked. Steve was informed that his behavior was unacceptable. Steve admitted that he was expecting expedited service and possibly a discount when he threatened to cancel. He didn't really want to cancel his accounts. He just wanted support to take him seriously and transfer him up the chain so he could get faster, better service. There was no real apology, though both I and the initial support agent were told that Steve would behave himself from now on, and to report if he didn't. Services were resumed, and all 7 locations were opened a bit late. The one location that did have issues yesterday got on the phone with a support agent and were sorted out in a reasonable amount of time. All is right in heaven and earth. But I do hope Steve learned that threatening to cancel your account sometimes leads to you canceling your account, and not to a discount. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called ForeverAgreeable2289. It says, "Can you imagine how much it must suck to work for Steve?" Another commenter down below called Harry WWC said, "Yeah, I'm a bit of a butthole. I would have left them cancelled and told Steve to pound sand. I'm sure one of the competitors could get his stores up and running in a week or so, maybe. F around and find out." Steve is one of those big fish in a little pond kind of people. We've talked about them here many times, and I don't think there's too much I can comment on this story that hasn't been said already and that you're not already thinking, but one thing I can definitely do is add in a "screw you, Rick," because this guy reminds me completely of my old boss named Rick, and he was a dick, which is kind of fitting because his name was Richard. But anyway, yeah, screw you, Rick, and let's move on to the next story. This story comes to us from MouseG23. You want us to dress in business attire when all other departments get to wear blue jeans? You got it. This happened many, many years ago. I worked for a top US banking institution. In our building, all of the other departments were allowed to wear blue jeans on Fridays. My manager decided that our department had to wear business attire on Fridays. To be clear, we had no customer-facing presence. Also, our department processes check deposits from ATMs, and they came in mesh bags from the armored couriers. They were usually quite filthy and were frequently wet in bad weather. So when our manager told us that we couldn't wear blue jeans on Fridays like every other department, the entire team was upset. Here is where we cue the malicious compliance. The next Friday, I went to my closet and found the most mismatched outfit I could put together, sticking completely to business attire. We're talking pastel floral print shirt with pants with bold colored stripes. I put it on and proudly walked into the office. My manager just happened to be on vacation that week, so nothing was said about my ridiculously mismatched outfit. Fast forward to the next Friday, I, once again, chose the most hideous combination of an outfit that I could put together. Once again, I walked into the office with my head held high, confident in my business attire. Imagine my surprise when I walked in and everyone on my team had on hideous combinations of clothing. As you can imagine, my boss walks in and sees everyone in their various hideous outfits. The look on her face was priceless. All 15 of us in hideous outfits, but all meeting the business attire dress code. She pulled us all into a meeting and told us that our attire was entirely inappropriate for a business environment and that she would have to write each and every one of us up. I asked her to pull out the company handbook and read the definition of what it said as business attire. She read it, and it stated something like clean and pressed business attire consisting of slacks, skirts, or dresses, and clean pressed shirts or blouses. It went on to say something like no blue jeans, t-shirts, ripped or clothes with holes, no sleeveless shirts, and no athletic or gym shoes. I asked her where in the guidelines does it say anything about whether the outfits matched or not. She couldn't find anything, and said she would have to contact HR to discuss with them what her options were to write us up. Needless to say, none of us were ever written up. She did, however, say we still needed to dress in business attire. Word quickly spread to other departments about her forcing us to wear business attire. The next week, 2 departments around us decided they would also dress up in hideously matched clothing. The managers of those departments quickly got in touch with our manager and put pressure on her as they didn't like how their employees were dressing. Our manager called us into a meeting and told us we could wear blue jeans on Friday going forward. Malicious compliance wins. Sometime later, I will tell you about the sign in and sign out board she created. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Thank You Happy. It says, management and leadership are important, but you need a motivated crew who wants to work for that person. You need workers more than they need you. Another commenter down below called DJ House Shoes said, I'm pretty sure HR would be interested in a manager calling an entire team into a meeting just to threaten writing them all up for something that is not an HR violation. Can you all imagine the feeling being OP and walking into work that one Friday morning and finding that everybody else there jumped on board with your malicious compliance? That feeling would be amazing. And then to have the other departments do the same thing a couple weeks later, wow. OP, you definitely started something, and you were the beginning of the change that your office needed. Everybody followed you. That means they look up to you as a role model. If there's anything else you want to get changed there, lead the way, because it does look like everybody else will follow. Now at the end of this one, OP mentioned about the sign in, sign out board, and they did write up that story, so let's jump into that one now. This one comes to us from the same OP, MouseG23. It's titled, So You Want Us to Sign In and Sign Out Whenever We Have to Leave the Area? Cue Malicious Compliance Part 2. Same manager, second time she tried to micromanage. This also happened a long time ago when I worked for a major financial institution. This story is not quite as detailed as my last story. It involves the same manager and department that I worked in for the last story. Manager decided that she needed to track where we were at all times. Therefore, she put up a whiteboard with all our names on it with columns for sign out time, sign in time, and she wanted us to put a reason why we left our desk. I am sure you probably have an idea as to where this is going. It started out simply enough. I needed to go ask someone in another department a question. We didn't have our own dedicated phones, just one phone for each department. I, like the good girl I am, put the time I walked out of the department and who I went to see. When I got back, she was waiting for me and told me quite loudly that I didn't put in why I had to go see that person, and that going forward, I needed to be more detailed in why I had to leave my desk. She made sure it was in front of the entire team. Cue my malicious compliance. I had to use the restroom, so I walked up to the board, put in the time I was leaving, and in the reason, I put that I was going to the restroom, and that I would be urinating and defecating while I was in there. I walked out of the department and went to do my business. My manager had stepped out to attend a meeting at that time. Well, little did I know that my team had my back, and they all went to the board and signed out and put that they were going to the restroom, with varying detailed reasons as to what they were going to do while they were in the restroom. When I got out of the restroom, all my team members were there waiting for me. We walked back into the department together, just in time to see our manager standing in front of the board with one of her peers, as they had both been in the same meeting. The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. Needless to say, the board was very short-lived. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Catless Boy Mom. It says, time 11:36, going to restroom, reason, got shit to do. Another user down below called Avid Learner said, it's amazing how creative people can get when they're micromanaged. The manager probably thought she was being clever with her sign-in board, but it seems like everyone had a different idea of fun. I bet the sight of that board filled with quirky restroom updates was priceless for her. It's kind of inspiring to see how small acts of rebellion can bring a team together and teach someone a lesson in humility. Plus, it's funny to think about what she must have been thinking when she walked back into her own department. Yep, I can agree with this one. The manager walking back into her department with nobody being there while she was with one of her colleagues, that would be amazing. They both walk in and they're going, where's the whole team? And then they walk up to the board and see all the different reasons they went to the bathroom in graphic detail. That was absolutely amazing. OP, as I said in the previous one, it sounds like everybody at your workplace is willing to follow you and back you up. That is a superpower. Make sure you use it wisely. This story comes to us from High Rise Drifter. I gave more than required, new manager didn't like this, and made some changes to my contract. 13 years ago, when I worked for the UK government, I lived on the south coast of the UK and worked in London, so I had a reasonably long commute of about 90 minutes on a train each way. I had a motorbike accident which severely injured my left leg and hip, so I asked my HR department and boss to allow me to come in earlier and finish earlier to avoid rush hour, so I wouldn't have to suffer the pain of standing on a packed train all the way to work and back. They both agreed. Our office had a flexi-time workday of 8 hours, 7 hours plus a 1-hour lunch break between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. How you chose to do that was up to you. However, business needs often dictated that some people needed to stay later or whatever. So my agreement with HR would allow me to circumvent that and just stick to my new agreed upon hours of 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Of course, due to the train times, I would get into the office about 30 to 40 minutes before I was due to start and would leave 30 minutes after my agreed upon finish time. And I always put in an extra hour of work a day to do that. And I also often skipped my lunch break and just worked through it if needed to. There followed a blissful year of me managing my time perfectly and getting into the office without being in pain. When a new manager came into our office, he pulled me aside after a few weeks and said, "There is a perception in the office that you leave early." Of course, he wasn't privy to the agreed upon change in my time, and didn't like the fact that I got in early and left early when he usually had to stay until 5 p.m. at the earliest and 8 p.m. at the latest. So he arbitrarily changed my work hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, meaning that I had to stand on the train to and from work. Also meaning that by the time I got into the office in the morning, I was in extreme pain. He still expected me to start work early and finish late though, like I had been. He told me that this had been agreed with HR as it had been over a year since my accident, and I was expected to have made a full recovery. I hadn't though, and in fact, I still suffer from a weakened leg to this day. However, my new contract hadn't removed the clause that allowed me to only work 8 hours without any expected overtime. So I would get into the office at 8:15 to 8:20 each day and sit reading the newspaper, or sometimes literally doing absolutely nothing, which infuriated my boss even more, and clock in exactly at 9 a.m. and then clock out exactly at 5 p.m., no matter what I was doing. I would also take exactly 1 hour for lunch each day, regardless of whether I was doing anything. He tried to arrange meetings for before, after, and during those times, and I would decline them or leave during a meeting if it overran. There was nothing he could do about it. When he complained to me, I pointed out that it was in the contract that he had signed off with HR. Sadly, he made my life more difficult in other ways, and the pain in my leg got worse due to having to stand to and from work. So this crappy situation only lasted for a few months before I quit. Still, those few months got him very angry, so it was kinda worth it. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Hattix. It says, "There's no way some manager anywhere in the civil service could unilaterally change a disabled person's contract without being put on a disciplinary themselves. If you're disabled requiring any other kind of medical consideration at work, your employer is required to make all reasonable adjustments. If this is true, you're missing out the end bit of it where you were awarded 6 figures in a discrimination settlement." Yep, if you're in this situation, 2 words you need to look up are constructive dismissal, but you also need to look into the laws for disabled workers in your country, because it sounds to me like this would be going against those laws in a pretty large way, just like the commenter was saying, and you could be eligible for a very large payout if you were to take this to court. Now, that being said, we don't know what country you're in, so look up constructive dismissal as well, because it seems like they forced you out of the company with what they were doing. Everything that they changed made you quit because they wouldn't accommodate you. I just feel like you could get a lot more out of this than you might think, and it might be worth looking into. This story comes to us from Dungeons and Data. I guess you like paperwork. So, background, I work in US Customs Compliance, which, due to the current administration, is annoyingly unstable. Tariffs are being changed left and right, as well as the definitions of what products count as what kind of products, or materials being classified as specific exemptions. It's a mess. However, there's this thing called duty drawback that ended up being a big deal at my company. To really water it down, if Company A imports products to the US, but then immediately ships it to, say, Canada, to their franchise stores, Company B, then technically Company A was simply a stop en route and not the ultimate receiver. Company B pays taxes, called duty, on the product, but because Company A also paid taxes, Company A is due a refund for the duty paid, hence duty drawback. So after months of chasing down this information, going back 5 years, learning we had holes in the info, trying to patch that up, trying to figure out the math, making it accurate, finding errors, etc., up to 16-hour days because someone promised we could get this done in 2 months when we needed 5, and weekends torpedoed by work calls, we finally submitted the application. And it worked. We got a great return, but because we missed the deadline by a day and it was a rocky process, my boss was let go over poor performance and missed opportunities. Never mind the fact that this project was his idea and he was the one who got it rolling in the first place. And then the higher-ups decided that they wanted records of everything covered. Not digital though, that's not official enough. Printed in binders with official letterhead, sealed and signed if you would. Well, my boss's superior, who is covering his desk, came to us livid at the extra work we had to do, and said, they want paperwork? They get paperwork. Find the biggest binders you can find and put everything on hold until they get what they want. And just to make sure they see everything, print it single-sided. So far, we have about 3,600 printed pages, hole punched by yours truly, stuffed into 6 binders. And that got us through June of year 1 of 5. The binder pile is 3 feet tall already, and I get to do more of that when I get back to work. Compared to what I've been through recently, this is practically a vacation. And today, I finally got the response. When I came into work, all 6 binders were missing, and I came to find out my new boss had taken them to the higher-ups without us. She apparently marched right over to the executive's office and dropped all 6 binders on the desk without a word. This is paraphrasing, but this is what she relayed to us afterwards. What is this? The records you asked for. Ah, good. Now, the first 6 months. The what? Of the first year of 5. My boss then described in absolute glee how the executive sat there sweating as she continued to explain how she was glad that we could get such important work done in the middle of the tariff changes and the policy updates, and she was so happy the executive was willing to store all the records. Which prompted the executive to ask why they were being stored in his office. Well, that's when he was reminded that, due to digital supremacy, our off-site storage for file retention had been drastically reduced last year. He asked for the rest of the files in PDF. We couldn't stop laughing quietly on the way back to our desks. Vacation over, I guess. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Schneeflock667. It says, "It's somewhat disappointing that you did not print out everything before going up." OP responded and said, "I wanted to and we had the binders ready, but I think a 3 feet tall tower of paper and plastic still got the point across. Geez, I can't even imagine how heavy that was. I only lifted one at a time." Another commenter down below called Might342 quoted OP when they said up to 16-hour days, and they said, "Don't do this. Your lack of work-life balance and the effects on both mental and physical health are not worth it. Do your job in a reasonable amount of time, and if you don't make it, you don't make it. Their lack of planning doesn't make an emergency on your part. I bet they will look at how fast you did this and come to expect that as normal moving forward. Expect more unreasonable timelines for deliverables in the future." OP, this is completely true. I do hope, number one, that you're not salaried and you're hourly, and they were paying overtime for all those extra hours that you put in, because 16 hours a day is absolutely unreasonable, and there's no way you should be doing that. I sincerely hope you were fairly compensated for those hours, although I have a sinking suspicion that you probably weren't. This story comes to us from Infinite Salary 5861. "Sorry sir, you can't enter your building." A few years ago, I worked in armed security at a hospital. The Greater Health System owned 3 large hospitals, each with a 24-hour trauma center. It had a couple smaller county hospitals and dozens of clinics scattered across 3 states. I worked at one of the bigger hospitals in a bad part of town. There were legitimate security threats on a daily basis here. One day, I was told to stand at the main entrance and keep staff out. Huh? Apparently, some middle management person wrote a new policy that staff members are to enter and exit the building through the west entrance only. The main entrance was to be used by patients and guests, and they didn't want employees cluttering the main entrance, because, God forbid, people see medical staff upon entering a hospital. My task was to stand at the door and tell nurses, doctors, cafeteria staff, facilities, janitors, etc. to use the west entrance. Anyone who refused had their name written down and would be reprimanded later. Now, I had other crap to worry about, like EDPs fighting people in the ER, or people running onto the helipad and taking a selfie with the life flight patient, or dudes on PCP yelling at the wheelchairs, or the old woman with dementia who wandered off and can't find her room. You know, actual security problems. The main entrance posting was a waste of my time, and it dragged on for several days, until one day, a man wearing a suit leading a gaggle of important people, all in business attire. The ringleader had an employee ID badge and was speaking enthusiastically to the group. They were heading straight for the main entrance. "Sorry folks, gotta use the west entrance." What? Hospital policy, all employees must use the west entrance. We're going to use this entrance, as he points to the door. Okay, but I'll need to take your names down. Your supervisor will be informed. The ringleader stares at me like I'm the biggest idiot alive and holds his ID badge in front of my face for an uncomfortably long time. I took his name down and every single member of his gaggle with painful slowness. I should add, they were all very polite, despite my obvious lack of F's to give. Shortly after, the security supervisor arrives. How's it going? Not bad, I have a dozen or so names, and I show him the list. Is that? He points to the ringleader's name. I don't know, his badge said Chief Something Officer. He looked important. Chief Executive Officer? Yeah, I think that was it. Supervisor quickly walked away. It turns out the CEO of the health system was bringing a group of potential investors, the aforementioned gaggle, for a tour of the place. He was never informed of the main entrance policy change and was greatly embarrassed to be stopped at the entrance of his own hospital by some rent-a-cop. Suddenly, as if by magic, staff could use the main entrance again, and I could return to actual security work. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called J Demic. It says, the flip side of you not stopping the CEO is you get fired for not enforcing policy. So, good job. Does anybody else think that if the CEO was bringing investors to the hospital and the investors saw just how good the security was at that front door, it would actually be a plus and a good thing? Might make them even want to invest in that hospital because they're taking security seriously. I know the guy at the front door, OP, had no idea who the CEO was, and like the commenter said, if they let the CEO and that big group of people right in, then they could have been fired by their boss. So I think it was a win-win situation, really. This story comes to us from I Don't Want to Sign In. Just something to make it better. I used to be the systems, admin, engineer, everything at a company of 300 people. Most of them were remote salespeople with laptops, and most of the salespeople had unpaid interns in this training program that, to me, seemed like hell. The interns were provisioned with any computer that I could cobble together. Part of the program was getting the commissions enough to earn an office and a computer. Seemed stupid to me, but not my policies. These things were mid-grade Dell workstations and had long surpassed their useful cycle. The president, the co-owner, the VP, HR, and my leadership will not allow new equipment allocation to the interns under any circumstances. Not even $10 keyboards that come with new computers. It has to be decommed from an employee or sales rep to get into the hands of the interns. Well, another quirk about this company is that your service priority was determined by your performance in sales, which meant that mentors would advocate for their interns, and there was constant squabbling over who got less crappy equipment, and nearly every sales rep was a self-important jackbutt. One rep was having a particularly good year, and one of his interns had one of the better crap boxes, but complained about it constantly. I already pool RAM and swap processors whenever possible, so this rep, we'll call him John, calls me into his office every week or so to disparage me because I'm the one responsible for his intern being held back. Note that the reps are allowed to pay for gear for interns if they want to pay for it, but they never do. Eventually, the company VP, a self-important jackbutt that the president liked but failed utterly as a salesperson, calls me into his office to discuss my attitude. I'm extremely professional at work and took the beating. VP knew the situation but took John's side and ordered me to improve the situation in some way. Do something, anything, to enable the success of the intern. Make sacrifices if you have to. Fine. I had an off-brand computer case in my office that was gathering dust. It was there when I started, and I had no idea where it came from. Over the weekend, I transplanted everything in the intern's workstation to that computer case. Since it was coming from a Dell workstation, I had to remove all the slides and parts that make the thing easy to service, but I made it fit. It was a rush job and a monstrosity, but I got to build time for it. I had to fashion a metal shim to cover the holes that the mainboard didn't extend to, but it worked. Same insides. Oh, and because it was such a mess, I had to leave a stick of RAM out since it wouldn't fit. Oh, and I accidentally dropped the processor that I didn't need to remove and had to put in another processor from another machine that was slightly slower. Carefully removed the Windows sticker from the old case and put it on the new case too. Got into work early on Monday and plugged it in. A few hours later, I got called down to John's office and figured I was in for it. The thing was even crappier than before, but in a different, not better container. Intern was beaming. John was beaming. VP was beaming. They thanked me for my hard work and gave me a $5 gift card to a coffee shop. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called ThunderThighs94. It says, "It's people like that intern and mentor and VP that make it harder for the ones that actually need and would take full advantage of the upgrades. But it is definitely fun to Frankenstein a better workspace from hand-me-downs." I feel like in tech support, there's a lot of cases where you can just polish something to make it seem like it's better. It's a perceived thing where I have this brand new case, and even though it's not going as fast, I don't realize that because, look at this, it's a brand new case, it's gotta be better. I've heard stories like this one before where they took the new facelifted front plate from a computer and took it off and put it onto the older computer, didn't change anything inside, and the user was so happy because, oh my gosh, it's working so much better now, it's so much faster, thank you so much. This story comes to us from JohnWick1089, how I became the pettiest customer in a Jockey showroom. One fine day, my mom and I set off for what was supposed to be a quick supermarket run, which if you have an Indian mom, you know is never actually quick. We usually park right in front for an easy escape, but that day the parking lot was packed. So I found a spot a little further away and parked. And that's when he appeared. Like a parking ninja with a personal vendetta, a Jockey showroom employee materialized and declared, "No parking here." Huh? I looked around. That's when I realized I had parked in front of a Jockey showroom, which is beside the supermarket. But hold on, I wasn't just going to take this guy's word for it. I circled my car like a CSI investigator, inspecting every detail. The findings? My car was behind the shop boundary. I wasn't blocking the entrance. The giant Jockey hoarding, featuring some awkwardly muscular guy in briefs, was fully visible from the road. No parking signs anywhere. In short, my parking job was innocent until proven guilty. But this guy, he was determined to make me guilty anyway. No parking here. There's no sign that says I can't park here. You still can't park here. I'm not blocking anything. No parking. I'm outside your showroom boundary. No parking. At this point, I realized this quarrel could last a while. So I turned to my mom and said, "You go ahead and shop, I'll deal with this." She, being the smart woman she is, walked off to the supermarket while I prepared for battle. After a few more rounds of pointless verbal combat, I had an idea. A genius, petty, time-wasting idea. "Can your customers park here?" He pauses. "Yes." "Congratulations, I'm a customer now." And with that, I marched into the Jockey showroom with the confidence of a man who had absolutely no intention of buying anything. I started slow. "Show me a brief." He brought one out. Do you have this in blue?" He sighed and fetched a blue one. "Actually, maybe black is better." Another sigh, another trip to the shelf. 5 minutes in, I could feel his soul leaving his body, but I wasn't done. "I don't think I like these. Show me some vests." More running around, more wasted time. I studied each piece like I was choosing my wedding outfit, not underwear. Just as I was about to move on to socks, my mom called. "Where are you? I'm done shopping." Mission accomplished. I turned to the exhausted shopkeeper, flashed my most polite smile and said, "I don't think I need anything today." Then I walked out like I had just won the war. As I got into my car, I stole one last glance at him. He was standing there, staring at me, his eyes filled with rage, regret, and the haunting realization that he had wasted 10 minutes of his life for absolutely nothing. But the best part, a month later, I passed by the same spot and saw a different car parked in the exact same place. And there was no customer inside the Jockey showroom. That's when I knew he had learned his lesson. Moral of the story, if you mess with a man's parking, Be prepared to sell underwear to the most indecisive customer in history. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called DJA Cobb 205. It says, I will respect signage specifying a specific store, but if it is a shared parking lot, as long as I am shopping in that shopping center, I am legally parked. I would have told that guy to get stuffed, but I like your method better. Another commenter down below called Gwen Beth said, it's not just Indian moms, I'm from the southern US and my mom is exactly the same way. The real question is, did your mom expect you to carry in all the groceries when y'all got home, like my mom does? Okay, I feel this. Every time my wife goes to a store like Walmart, she has a list of things she needs to get, but she has to look at every single thing that's on the shelf in that store. That trip takes 3 times longer than it really needs to. Then, when I go into the store on my own to get something, it's in the door, straight up to the aisle where the thing I need is, grab the thing I need, turn around, walk back to the checkout, pay for it, and leave. Why is it so different? But, I mean, I guess she can do whatever she wants to do. I just don't go with her. This story comes to us from Shieldtown 95. You can't have a phone until your brother needs a new phone. This one is short and sweet. This happened about 20 years ago. I desperately wanted a cell phone. I did not have one at the time. In a family of 4, my older brother had our sole cell phone line at the time. He needed it more for some reason. My parents had an arbitrary rule. I couldn't have a phone until my brother needed a new phone. I'm not sure if there was a deal at the time, like get 2 lines or a family plan, and save some money, but that was the rule. My brother's phone was perfectly fine until I broke it. Got my Nokia phone soon afterwards. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, edit because so many people have asked this question. I slammed the phone vertically, antenna up, on the garage cement floor. It managed to break the parts that held the battery in place. Technically, the phone still worked if you held the battery in place, but the battery would slip out if you didn't. With some tape, it could have still functioned, but the damage and annoyance was just enough to justify a new phone. I completely thought of this one the wrong way because I was assuming when they said that when the brother gets a new phone, OP would get a phone. I was kind of thinking that the one from the brother was going to get passed down to OP, but that's obviously not the case, so they had to buy brother a new phone because it was broken, and then they also bought one for OP. Is there something here I'm not understanding? Let me know in the comment section down below, or if you're on Spotify, you can comment there as well. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Nom.